And hello, my name is David Ben Murphy. Welcome to Telpax 1. That's our YouTube channel. And from time to time at 4 o'clock on Saturdays here on the West Coast, we broadcast live on YouTube things of a spiritual nature. And we have a call-in number. If anybody should happen to be listening and they want to ask a question, it's 866-471-4321. What I try to do here is give testimony, my testimony, and listen to other people's testimony of the things of God, perhaps things of the devil. That's not my hope to talk about the devil, but some people certainly may think that. Today, this is the first Saturday here in 2026. Happy New Year, everybody. And I've chosen to talk about an experience I had in 1978, an out-of-body experience of heaven and hell. Hell, to begin with. I experienced that before experiencing the other. And this is not a teaching. Teaching may creep into what we do here on the channel, but it's not my purpose or intent to do Bible teaching or any other kind of spiritual teaching. I am a teacher, but not a teacher of spiritual things, a teacher of trivia, mostly computer trivia, techie stuff, for seniors usually trying to get to use their computers. Why am I talking about something so long ago? Well, first of all, in the eternal 47 years is not long ago. It seems like moments ago. Life is short, that's for sure. But I've just been pressed to talk about this. I'll be reading from my journal a couple years ago. I did a journal in late August of 2023, writing about this. I have a journal about many things. Using the journal, I'll be reading out of it, but interjecting and adding to it also. And I may be interrupted by a phone call, maybe not. Unlike many teachers and preachers, I actually welcome interruptions. I don't mind being questioned. If what I'm talking about is true, it will stand. And if it isn't, it should rightfully fall. So, out-of-body experience, and is that a Christian thing? I mean, I can't say I've ever heard a preacher mention the words out-of-body experience, with the sole exception of John MacArthur. I started researching John MacArthur, who's now passed into glory. He mentioned out-of-body experiences as one of the gifts of the Holy Spirit that isn't experienced anymore, along with prophecy, true spiritual tongues, healing. What other gifts of the Spirit are there? He said that none of them are valid, and they're all of the devil. So there is a mention, of course, in 2 Corinthians 12, and you can go there and read that for yourselves. I've heard that talked about, the chapter talked about maybe a couple times by preachers over the years, but there was never a mention of it being an out-of-body experience, even though, if you listen to Paul's words, clearly that's what it was. Okay, I'm going to start reading here, and I'm not sure how long we're going today. Again, if you listen to this broadcast after it's live, I will be on again live at 4 o'clock Pacific, 7 o'clock Eastern on Saturday at some point. At this, I don't have a commitment to do this every week, unless, of course, I was asked to, and that hasn't happened yet. No one's asking for this, and I don't know if anybody is going to actually hear me, and that really doesn't matter. So reading here, I last wrote extensively about my August 1970 experience during my 40 days in jail. Now, you can listen to my podcast about that, 40 days, 40 nights in jail. Again, a very important experience in my life. It was the first time that I had in jail to fully recount my experience, and I wrote it out on legal pads, and perhaps I'll eventually find my old notes in storage and do a comparison between my notes of 1994, when I was in the county jail in San Luis Obispo, and what I wrote here a few years ago. I write this, the journal is 45 years after the event. I've talked about it before, notably on the Dave Congleton radio program in person as a guest back in the spring of 2005. My story has never been validated by any human being so far. Incidentally, I did meet with my prayer accountability partner just this past week, and we're trying to act out James 5:16, where we have mutual confession of sins and other things in our life. And we talked about this, and I wound up giving him a copy of what I'm reading right now. He told me he would respond to it, but he hasn't yet. So after all this time, no real response, mostly silence to my story. Anyway, this is a testimony. It's what I saw, felt, heard back then. In 1978, I never heard about out-of-body experiences. It wasn't popular in the media or anything. I hadn't read about it yet. In the Center of the Cyclone by John Lilly. That's a book I was reading in 1978 after the event. John Lilly is famous for research on the brains of dolphins. I never read 2 Corinthians 12. That's simple. I wasn't reading the Bible for myself until 20 years later. I had not seen the movie Resurrection. That certainly concerns out-of-body experience, that movie. But that wasn't made until 1980. My girlfriend Jennifer Harris, this is 1978, summer, chose Esalen and reserved the workshop Self and Beyond, led by John Ziegler of UCLA. My going to Esalen wasn't even my idea. It was Jennifer's. I saw Moore Bay for the first time during that trip to Big Sur. I would spend much of the rest of my life in the Moore Bay area. I'm talking to you from my office in Los Osos, a few miles away from Moore Bay at the ocean here in California. Anyway, the class started Sunday night with the last session on Thursday night. I never heard of Esalen, but it was portrayed as the Institute in Bob, Carol, Ted, and Alice movie I saw much earlier when I was at the Air Force Academy on a Friday night. It freaked out the officers that were watching, and I remember. 2 years earlier, from 1978, I'd been introduced to the Elysian Fields in Topanga, part of the Human Potential movement. And come to think of it, I met Jennifer at some other place. But anyway, Elysium was a well-known nudist place in Topanga Canyon. I'd already become comfortable being with strangers without my clothes on. At Esalen, nudity was only practiced at the massage tables. That's a Freudian slip, by the way. Massage tables and at the hot spring baths. This was intended to be a Gestalt workshop. I hadn't heard about that before either. The object was to get in touch with your feelings, the product of the much neglected right brain. That's where John Lilly comes in. He studied the right brain and the left brain, how they work together and mostly not work together. Love and acceptance, if it existed, was to be found and expressed by this side the brain. We had a little seminar at the very beginning of the Gestalt workshop talking about what Gestalt is, talking about the right brain. I was introduced to deep breathing exercises. Deep breathing would help me get out of my head thinking and get in touch with my feelings. And I thought for a while it was a magical key to experiencing things. It may or may not help. I'm not sure it's important at all. The whole teaching by John at the workshop became a mini religion to me, or at least a part of my philosophy. My feelings became my God for years to come. That was my judge, arbiter. If it felt right, it was right. I think of the words of Debbie Boone, how could it be wrong when it feels so right? I kind of went along with that. Anyway, my feelings would justify anything I did. And I should say, anything that I did. It's difficult to write about my out-of-body experience at Esalen. Again, no human being has ever expressed agreement with me or given me validation or an acknowledgement of understanding. When I talked about it on the local Dave Congleton radio show back in the spring of 2005, my best friend J.D., who was staying with us at that time, said he heard it on the radio, but that's all he ever said. He never made any other comment about it. A caller on the radio show expressed surprise that the Art Bell show was on so early. He called and said, "Is Art Bell on early today?" Because it was like an Art Bell topic. He talked about usually aliens and ESP and any kind of way out there experiences. So, but that was a quick phone call. I'm not sure we got any other phone calls. I don't think we did. Again, silence. Here I am on the radio at KVEC in San Luis Obispo. Silence. When I saw a New York psychiatrist about it in late '78, he said it was psychosis. My only satisfaction was never paying his bill. Of course, there were many unpaid bills back in those days. He should have known that I was a thief. I mean, I was. Oddly, John Seigler of UCLA, who led the Self and Beyond 5-day session, did at one point refer to me as a thief. I don't know. I don't think it was anything I said. It was Friday night. Dinner was done. This is the last session before the end. Saturday, new people are coming in to do their weekend workshops, whatever it might be. I was filled with a tremendous sense of anticipation after dinner. Just incredible anxiety. And it wasn't about, it was beyond explanation, really. It was a sense of something's about to happen. I have a cold getting over. There's a heightened energy level in me and in everything. I was greeted by a friendly lady of the group that said, "I won't be there tonight." She knew something was coming. "But I hope you get what you need." She was most perceptive, and she was scared. How interesting. So at the appointed time, what was it, 7 o'clock or whatever it was, I took the catbird seat. You have the one principal person who's having the session. I sat in the lotus position. After all, this was Esalen, not Grace Church. The priority was to get in touch with your feelings, not express intellect or use words. I remember I was wearing my yoga shirt. I think I'd been saving it for my session. Very loose-fitting. I tried to follow this directive, not to express intellect, not to use words. I started deep breathing. Deep inhale and slow exhale. I found my body sinking during the exhales. I started moaning during the exhales. I'm not sure that's it, but it was an agonizing sound. And creating a distinctive humming sound. I don't even know what to make of that. I started to experience agony, pain. I was in agony. Not physical agony, though. I continued deep breathing and moaning. It started getting louder. And louder. I screamed with all my being. In my mind, I experienced, hopefully not a Freudian slip, I experienced all the unlove, hate, rejection, betrayal, and failure with everybody that I ever knew in my life. I couldn't think of any person that I'd ever known that really loved me. Who can blame them? There's something to that, by the way. I finally had to say something. After a while, this is the time for words. And the words I came up with, and I shouted this, they're all a bunch of shits. S-H-I-T-S apostrophe. I broke down to a whimper and crying. And John led me to repeat after him. Now, repeat after me. I'm a shit. I started to smile and laugh. And after a bit, I went along with them. I said, I'm a shit. Now John led me again. You're a shit. That was easy. I said, you're a shit. And I spoke with much delight. Then John added, we're all shits. And John concluded, and that's the way it is. I don't think I repeated this last phrase, that's the way it is. But I was struck by its cosmic irony. It was like a tuning fork going off, or maybe hitting your funny bone in your arm. It seemed very profound to me. That's the way it is. I started to moan again. And then something quite extraordinary started to happen to me. Both my hands and my feet, and I can't duplicate it for you. And I'm sitting in lotus, so I have my hands. Where are my hands? My hands are usually on my knees. They're like this, and they're vibrating like huge tuning forks. And my hands vibrating is one thing, but my feet were also vibrating, going like this, my hands and my feet. And something quite extraordinary started to happen to me. My vibration never happened to me before or in the last 46 years. I started to slowly rock backwards and forwards. I'm sitting in lotus and I'm rocking backwards and forwards. When I rocked backwards, I went back to my childhood and all the hate and resentment that I had for everyone that I had ever known. And the hatred I had for people, and it was pure hate, as good a hate as I could come up with. It was my only solace, my only comfort in my agony, the hatred. And the hatred was delightful, but I was swung back to my past and to the hatred. I also swung back into darkness, complete aloneness, darkness, isolation. Now, to be truthful, I had experienced this once before in December 1971 when I had my one and only acid trip. It was great acid, from what everyone told me that was around me. But when I came off the acid trip, it was my experience of the outer darkness, the weeping and gnashing of teeth, outer darkness, and I experienced that. I experienced it so much that I panicked and I needed to get out of there. And I remember driving away in my Triumph Spitfire, little sports car, and on the way out, it had been snowing, so it was slippery on the roads. I remember swinging out of control and breaking my little tail light in the back of the car. That's the only damage there was, but I was panicked, wanting to get out. Hell, I can say, is like being on a bad acid trip. If you've ever been on a bad acid trip, or even a good one, acid trips, as something from the past, I think so. But I would rock back, and I delighted in this hatred I had, because it was justified hatred that I had for everybody. I mean, I couldn't find any exceptions of anybody that I had ever known. And I guess I loved this hatred. I didn't want to give it up. I wanted revenge. I just didn't want to kill them. I wanted to drag them down to the darkness that I was experiencing. I wanted them to go to hell. But then I would rock forward. I was still deep breathing and moaning quite pitifully. Moaning. Moaning. But I found myself no longer in the room. My consciousness, I was out of there. I was no longer in that room with those dozen people in Big Sur. But I was in a long, dark tunnel. This tunnel experience has been mentioned by many, many people in near-death experiences. This was not a near-death experience, but the pain that I was experiencing is perhaps reminiscent of death. I don't know. But each time I rocked forward, I would get a little closer to the light. So I was going back and forth. The reason I would go back, because I loved that hatred. I loved the revenge I could get on these people. But then I was pulled forward again. And each time I was pulled forward, I would get a little closer to the light. But then I was snatched back to the darkness. And then, with struggle, I would get to rock forward again. And I was pulled backwards and forwards, between the darkness and lovely hatred and revenge, and the tunnel, definite experience of being in a tunnel, and finally, I let go. I had to put it behind me forever. It was a choice I had to make. I could never go back. But I let go, and I made a deliberate and distinctive choice. I sprang forward like being released by a bear. I didn't see anything further. Got to the bright light, but I didn't see anything. But what I felt was so wonderful, indescribably wonderful. I was completely happy. I was completely fulfilled. And the fulfillment, words cannot really describe what we're talking about, by the way. But I'm trying a little. I was content. I had everything I ever needed or wanted. Everything. It was so wonderful. I felt like, my notes say, the newborn baby of a 2001: A Space Odyssey. I did feel like a newborn baby. A distinct experience of being a newborn baby. Innocent, looking at everything for the first time. And I was soon back in the room at Esalen. John was on my right, and you had in front of me the main group of people, maybe 9 or 10 people, and they were all huddled together up against the wall as far back as they could get. And they were mostly scared. The two people to my left, and you have here a lady named Cookie. That's what I named her. I don't know what her real name was. And she had a temporary boyfriend. And they're on my left. And they seemed to be different. They seemed maybe to understand what I was experiencing. John introduced the main group of people, and here's the class of 1978. And it just struck me as being so funny, so incredibly funny what he said. I was speechless. I could only make baby sounds. I never wanted to speak again if it meant losing what I had. I wanted to hold on to it, knowing, of course, that I couldn't, but I was intensely proud of my experience. I knew it was unusual. It was so big what I experienced, and I was so small. So there was a humbling, in addition to the sense of pride about it. I was nothing, a speck in the universe, a speck, certainly in the presence of God, if that's what I was. I had a sense that what I experienced was profoundly old. It's hard to describe it. It was a feeling. It was more than just a thought. It was an experience of something ancient, wonderfully ancient. John, the leader, never spoke to me again. He avoided me after that. Others in the group wished they could have an experience like that. People in the class of 1978. I felt that what I experienced was too big for words or intellect. But oddly, I knew that only the Bible and the gospel of Jesus Christ could make any sense of it. Trying to describe what needed to be described and going to the Bible. I saw myself preaching the gospel. This was odd, since I had rejected Jesus with all my might and not been to church in years. My thoughts about Christianity, and also to get close to a Christian lady in New York that was my secretary in New York. Karen was her name. And actually Karen hooked me up with her parents who were going to Barbados, and I was to join them on the trip to Barbados, and in particular to meet up in a kind of a compound, fancy house with walls around it. And it was on Barbados, and I was meeting with a gentleman named Newman Payton, who was represented as being the Caribbean director of the Foursquare Businessmen's Association. And that didn't come to anything. I did go to church at midnight with black people on Barbados. But I did a bunch of deep breathing. That didn't help me, by the way. I I also went back to church on the way when I got back. But I suppose the problem with church on the way, and maybe all churches, Jack Hayford, probably the most brilliant preacher that I ever met and ever knew in my lifetime. But still, processing the Almighty, processing the infinite through human intellect, it's a filtering of something that's infinite, perfect, divine, and filtering it through your thinking. It diminishes it so much. I found myself deep breathing late at night in Santa Monica on the beach. That didn't amount to anything. I wanted to get back. I wanted to see if I could get back to that experience. But I never could. I went back to Esalen for a few weekends in the hopes of recapturing it. And incidentally, I found out that some folks were experiencing a cheap knockoff of what I had experienced. Apparently, my experience of ecstasy was looked at as with contempt and as being commonplace. I couldn't imagine. But I found one woman willing to engage in sex, but that's the closest. That wasn't ecstasy at all. That was actually mundane, as I recall. So much for Esalen in getting back to getting back to it. I stopped deep breathing exercises because that would seem like a waste of time, and I accepted a once in a lifetime experience. Or the least I couldn't get it back on my own. To paraphrase Bob Dylan, it may be the devil, it may be the Lord. Either way, I knew that there was a life beyond this life. Proving the existence of the devil is a darn way to prove the existence of God, but I knew that what I had was way beyond me. It was not my creation, and there was something way beyond this life experience. And I would always have that reassurance in me that could never be taken away from me. There's somebody greater than me. The light at the end of the tunnel was not a force or a principle. It was a person. And that person is the answer to everything. Well, no calls. That's not surprising. And there's more to my journaling on this. But I think we're at a good stopping point. Actually, how far are we? We're I had other trivia in my journal, but it's not important for our conversation right now. Anyway, thanks for listening. I hope that somebody out there has listened to this. And I am sure that there is a heaven, and I am sure that there is a hell. And it's up to us to decide what it will be. And I wish you all well. God bless you. Again, Happy New Year, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.